What happened to Amanda Bynes?
Amanda, how was it?
Hey guys!
Amanda, we've been looking all over for you.
Because Amanda's case has been treated as such a mystery. But by the end of this deep dive, the end of this video, you are going to see that it actually perfectly makes sense. What we should be asking instead is maybe what happens when a child star trauma goes unspoken for so long that the body takes over the job of telling the truth. Now, I am such an Amanda Bynes fan. I see her story as an absolute tragedy. So much of this deep dive, when I went through it and came out of it, it really came back to this book, The Body That Keeps Score. And this is the thing, is that even when we aren't speaking about our trauma, even when we're not aware fully of our trauma, the body does not forget. Inside The Body That Keeps Score, it even says that trauma is the world's hidden health crisis. And Amanda Bynes is honestly proof that some bodies scream louder than words ever could. When you look at Amanda Bynes' story from a trauma lens, you are going to see, number one, that it's a lot darker, but also you are going to see her much more compassionately.
Oh, you really thought this out.
Yeah, I'm not.
Now
Pretty sad.
No, it's not. It's great to have a dream.
We keep asking only after we get so far, how did we get here? How did they turn out like that? What happened to our beloved Amanda? Well, let me tell you, she didn't just fall apart. Her body literally stopped performing. She stopped being the version that people exploited and continued to profit on. But before we get too far into it, hi, my name is Julie Tice. Welcome back to my channel. All 50,000 of you guys. We hit a huge milestone, and I remember even celebrating when we were at our first 400 people, first 1,000 people. And I know some of you guys have been here since the beginning. I'm so excited to be growing this channel. There is so much more where this came from. So if you aren't already, please subscribe. But this has really grown into bigger than I had even imagined it. So many of you guys saying, thank you for finally putting language to what I have been feeling. Even though that you might not be Ariana Grande, Amanda Bynes, the Kardashians, you seeing yourself in these stories, in the psychology is really what this is all about. And I think Amanda's story, unfortunately, is going to be very relatable. You are going to walk away from this realizing that maybe some of your wounds were never spoken out loud, but your body kept score of them. You are going to see that despite maybe your best efforts to push things down and to even silence yourself, that you still can't outrun what is hidden beneath. I'm honored to be deep diving Amanda today. I've been a huge fan of her since I was little. I've looked up to her, admired her. Her story is so complex, so unique, so dark. So if you're watching with me, grab your snack, grab your diet soda. I say diet because that's what I drink. Stop freaking out about it. Buckle up and let's get into it. So breaking Amanda's story down and looking at what is the thesis, what is the lesson that I want you guys to take away from this? Before we move forward, I need you to understand the umbrella of unspoken trauma. And that is that unhealed childhood trauma does not disappear. It becomes physiology. The body remembers and reenacts what the mind cannot voice. I'm gonna give you a quick example of this. I kind of refuse to remember the death of my father. I don't want to know the anniversary date. However, it seems that every winter, without fail, things will come up for me. Some things I'll process a lot harder. I notice this even with holidays. Sometimes I've tried to go to other countries and I'm like, I don't want to think about the fact it's Thanksgiving. I don't want to think about the fact that it's Christmas. But no matter what, when I try to run from that, instead of processing it as we should, it will come up one way or another. I remember working with my therapist and realizing that a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms were coming up. And we were kind of like, damn, what's going on here? And in it, she's like, oh, well, when did your dad pass away? And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to think about it. And sure enough, I was like, let me just go and look. And it was on the day of his death. And I really see this with Amanda. She has done interviews. She really hasn't fully come out and really said what is the root of her trauma. She has reflected some on Nickelodeon, a little bit of her parents. We've seen the bizarre tweets, and I'm going to get into all of that. But I see a lot of stifling with Amanda. We got this tell-all book by Jeanette McCurdy, who beautifully recounted her childhood trauma. Amanda has said bits and pieces, but even through this deep dive and going through all of her interviews, I can tell it's there's so much she has not said, and she does not owe that to us. It might not be safe for her to do so, or it might not feel safe for her nervous system to do so. But even if we don't have the factual, this is absolutely what happened because it came from Amanda's mouth, her body has been telling us the story. Her behavior has been screaming to us that there is more. Like, there is something to be said behind, when a teen acts out, that there are cries for help. Sometimes our pain goes beyond what is verbal. And if we especially think about childhood trauma and down to when we were babies and neglected by some of our first caregivers, that pain and abandonment we felt is pre-verbal anyways. So a lot of the times this trauma will act out behaviorally. A lot of the times when I'll get clients sometimes, and if they seem like people who really are not comfortable speaking out about their trauma, they've spent a lot of time stifling what they feel because that's the environment that they grow up in, I'll ask people, I'll be like, do you have an autoimmune disorder? Basically, do you have a silent illness? And I cannot tell you how many people who have said, yes, I do. How did you know that? No one else knows that. Doctors did not pick up on that. It took me forever to figure out that I had an unseen illness. And I don't have anything beyond theory. And besides that, I have seen it in almost every single person that has a hidden illness, is that they have deep childhood trauma that they could not speak about. I don't know if Amanda does have that, but keep in mind for yourself, if you do not speak about the trauma, if you do not process the trauma will find a way to come out. And again, this goes into the body that keeps score. There's a reason why it says it in the book, and this is my belief as well, is that trauma is the world's hidden health crisis. Not just the amount of illnesses, but the amount of drug addicts we get, obesity, the ailments that depression and anxiety causes. We have such an unhealthy and sick world walking around, and we try to combat it with diet, with exercise. Not a bad move, but basically what I'm saying is we try to solve the fruits of the causes. We try to heal at such a surface level, and all of this needs to be divulged at the root. And how does this apply to Amanda Bynes? Well, I'm going to remind you. So in 2002, an article came out that basically said Amanda Bynes was the one teen star to come out unscathed, that she was this picture-perfect child star. They called her remarkably self-possessed. Dan Schneider bragged that she was almost like a Marsha Brady. And for the next decade after that even, that wholesome image held true.
You haven't been to jail?
No.
No jail?
Not yet.
Rehab?
No.
No rehab. Amanda Bynes, what kind of a starlet are you?
I know. What's wrong with me? I don't know. It's shocking how it's become popular to go to rehab.
Which I think is just eerie, knowing where we ended up, that at one point everyone was like, might be the rest of the messed up childhood stars, but not Amanda Bynes. And to see how much she was holding it together while breaking down until her body could not handle it. And now we are seeing the manifestation of everything that has happened to her. And we might not hear it in words, but we have seen it in her behavior and in her body. That sweet girl that you grew up watching eventually turned up in the news about her walking around naked in a psychotic episode. And we need to understand why. We should be asking these questions of why. So let's look at the sick Nickelodeon child star factory. We've talked about Nickelodeon before. We've talked about Dan Schneider before. And yeah, look at all these kids who came out, and they didn't come out very well. We learned from Quiet on set the kids were literally getting molested. We know that from Drake Bell coming forward and sharing his story. Drake Bell's story might not be every child's story inside this Nickelodeon factory, and we're not going to assume that it is, but what we do know for a fact is that these kids were working around abusers and predators. In fact, multiple crew members on the Nickelodeon's sets turned out to be convicted sexual predators. I don't even have to say alleged in this. They were convicted of sexually abusing minors. This is the work environment that stars like Amanda Bynes, Drake Bell, Ariana Grande walked into. And we talked a lot about the set in Ariana Grande's Dark Psychology Deep Dive. And you guys know from that Ariana Grande did not have great outcomes because of it. But before they were convicted, I want to remind you guys, there was rumors for years that there was child sexual abuse going on. We don't have from Amanda's own words that Dan Schneider sexually abused her or abused her in any way. There have been, however, blind items about it. What we do know factually, though, is that she spent a lot of alone time with him, that her parents allowed her to spend a lot of alone time with him. And we also know that these boundaries inside this Nickelodeon sick child star factory were extremely blurred. We do know that Dan Schneider was said to rage on set. He had an anger problem. He was extremely controlling. He had a very close relationship with Amanda. There's scenes of them being in a hot tub together that he put inside of the show. Also, this was a new one that I didn't really remember or like catch on to. But if you guys remember the Amanda show, there was www.amandaplease.com, right? This was an actual working website. And if you went to it, you could click around, and in it, the basically tabs you could click on were very like labeled like body parts. And there was even one section where you could look at Amanda's different body parts, and it was like extremely zoomed in, and it would have like her belly button on there, her foot on there, which again, this was an actual operating website that I think goes beyond, in my theory, goes beyond just it being part of the show. Like, to me, this is very much Dan Schneider was working for another audience and knew the other audience that he was working for, and probably profited and made money from that. I also found out that after I did Ariana Grande's deep dive that there is a website like this for her where it looked like it came from the show, but that there were clips that Ariana didn't know about of her that was getting posted on there, photos of her that she didn't know. And the thing too that I want to be brought up is we really go for Dan Schneider, this big bad man. And I do believe he was a big bad man. But we have to remember he existed and operated in this system. Like, they are all guilty. It wasn't just the kids that were hoping for their next big break and that stayed silent because of it. It was all of them. All of them let these kids be subjected to this abuse, to poor boundaries. The industry has done a horrible job at protecting these kids. And Amanda became the center of this machine. The Amanda Show was extremely successful. Amanda herself was extremely successful. She was praised for her comedic timing, for her charisma. She was absolutely someone who lit up the stage. She had 100% the it factor. But we know from all of these deep dives that I have done, when we look at child stars, we know that the psyche then grows up to learn, oh, I'm only loved when I'm praised. I'm going to do whatever for this applause. There's immense amount of pressure for them. They are kids on one hand, yet forced to be in these adult roles on the other hand. The self doesn't properly develop, and then how does the self-esteem develop and self-worth develop when the self is not developing, or it's only developing under this guise of applause? Who do you want me to be? I will be the chameleon. I will be whatever you want for this love, for this approval. So it's no wonder that these child stars crumble under the bright lights of fame. And when we look at this 2002 Times piece that was written, and Dan Schneider himself saying, Amanda has avoided all of the bad stuff. This article insisting at Amanda's squeaky clean image. It's almost like now that these words of praise read like a curse. And also, how damaging, because at the time they really blinded everyone to the storm that was brewing beneath. Amanda was the product of the Nickelodeon pipeline. She was meant to be cute and bubbly, agreeable, but that persona was a role she couldn't break out of, and one that she would have to destroy to maybe get the false feeling that she was finally reclaiming herself. The cracks in her psyche at this point, though, were already there. They were hairline fractures from the years of being on 24/7 and from private hurts we may never know about. For now, though, the golden girl of Nickelodeon smiled and did exactly as she was told. But by her late teens, Amanda had outgrown Nickelodeon, but Hollywood refused to see her as anything other than the child star they wanted to paint her as. She actually did make a really successful leap from TV to film. She had movies like She's the Man, Hairspray, Easy A. Really, she proved she could go beyond TV. She could carry a movie with her magnetism. And even critics claimed that she had a serious comedic gift, that she brought depth to these roles. Amanda herself started getting really frustrated at this pigeonhole that she was in. She felt like she couldn't escape anything other than being this quirky, funny, clown, goofy girl next door. And she knew it. And I think this really does lead to the Amanda that we see now, is this frustration of her not being able to break out of this goody-goody role, for her to even say, like, you guys don't know what I'm capable, and wanting to do more. And then also, like, these teen stars, like, they're all struggling behind the scenes. Like, we saw this with Ariana and Jeanette McCurdy's, like, being put being pitted against each other. But we learned from Jeanette McCurdy's memoir that shit does sit with the kids, that they can't really escape it. And we saw this with Amanda Bynes and also Lindsay Lohan. Like, this is something that she has revealed, that of watching Lindsay Lohan being able to, although we saw in that time Lindsay Lohan was getting DUIs, she was not seen as the good girl, and she had her own struggles because of this. But to someone like Amanda Bynes, who is wanting to break out of this pigeonhole of being the goody-goody and not being able to, she's watching Lindsay Lohan now with envy, that this girl is getting the more edgier roles. She's getting to play these sexier roles, these more complex roles. Amanda watched Lindsay get the roles that she wanted, and even in a 2008 interview saying, I'd love to do something that would shock people, something against my type. People don't know yet what I can really do. She basically was begging to be seen in a different way, and Hollywood's response, nothing. They're like, actually, you're going to keep being this role that we want you to be. She finally got this supporting role in Easy A, but this is a really important part of understanding where Amanda's psyche goes to next. And this role was more complex because it's in a more complex movie, but she still is playing this like Christian, prudish girl. And this was the movie too that we really started to see Amanda crack publicly. She had done an interview about this role where she admitted how obsessed she was over how she looked on camera, really hyper fixating on herself. And in her own words, she said, I saw it and was convinced that I should never be on camera again, which feels so insane if you're looking at this surface level, because Amanda's gorgeous. I thought she was beautiful in that role. Like, we look at her and we see nothing wrong, but that is not reflective of what is below the surface. Amanda had also reflected when she did She's the Man, how she hated seeing herself as a boy. And I mean, I can relate on some level too, of just like, you guys, when I edit these videos, sometimes I literally have to take a break. I'm like, I am so sick of looking at myself. Like, and I can't even imagine when you grow up in that environment and you are only a child star, like the brain already is not developing well. And then to just have to look at yourself, and then the paparazzi and criticism. And we see stories like this pop up from other celebrities. Like, I've seen so much now of Britney and even her time now on Instagram. And when she's going off, a lot of the time she'll talk about paparazzi and trying to make her look bad. And it's like, how can you not leave this machine that is Hollywood and the paparazzi and not come out with severe body dysmorphia? Again, like, their sense of self is already fragile. Their sense of self is already not developing. And on top of all of this body dysmorphia, Amanda really not having a safe place to ever process her trauma, she also was using drugs. I really think using drugs as a coping mechanism to it. She talks about getting on Adderall, and really Adderall at the time, before Ozempic, it was Adderall, and it was said to be this like skinny pill also. So when you have the pressure of weight and also needing to probably be awake and be on. Anyway, so she's abusing Adderall. She's abusing marijuana, may have been abusing other drugs. We don't fully know. And Amanda since has come out in interviews and talked about her drug abuse. She specifically said literally she was stoned all day long, waking and baking from morning till night. And maybe what started out as recreational abuse, or at least how she was justifying to herself recreational abuse, literally became destructive self-medicating, which, how can you blame her? Like, where else was she supposed to process any of her trauma? With her parents, with the adults that were supposed to keep her safe, in the environment that was supposed to keep her safe that absolutely didn't? No. So I think, of course, she turned to drugs. And that's what I want to say too about this Amanda story. There'll be a lot, and like, she comes out and pretty much says, you know, I had a different brain on drugs. Like, I was not myself because of drugs. And a lot of the times we leave it at just that. We're like, oh, someone was on drugs. But we miss what was before the drugs. Why were they coping so deeply with drugs? Yes, we could look at all of Amanda's behaviors and just pretty much check it up, be like, oh, she was on drugs. That's the end of it. Why was she on drugs? Why did she need to dissociate to such a deep level where she does not even want to be attached to reality? And that is because of the trauma that she experienced. Most people who are drug addicts really aren't just like getting high because they like the high. Of course they like the high, but they like the high because it is disconnecting them from a world that they don't want to feel, from pain that they don't want to feel. And Amanda says, I got really into my drug usage and it became a really dark, sad world for me. And it was basically in 2010 on the set of Hall Pass where her perfectionism and anxiety really self-sabotaged her. This is where we're like finally starting to see instances publicly out loud of Amanda's self-sabotage. And on the set, Amanda is using drugs. She's obsessing over her image, and she basically is like being super destructive on this set, to the point where they have to recast the role, which is crazy because the Hall Pass movie was kind of more of a role that she finally wanted. It was more of this adult role. So she finally gets the role and then completely self-sabotages to the point where she loses the role, gets fired, and the movie has to be recasted. But this wasn't diva behavior from Amanda. This was a woman who was in the throes of amphetamine addiction and body dysmorphia and her trauma finally coming up. How long can you continue to stuff it down, stuff it down, stuff it down? We would all love to probably do it forever because it's scary shit to deal with. But if you don't address it, I guarantee you it will come up one way or another. So psychologically, what was happening here? Well, this is another example. We talked a lot about this in my Ariana Grande video, but another example of identity fragmentation. The persona that Amanda had constructed since childhood, fun, bubbly, cute, agreeable, was cracking under the weight of adolescence and unaddressed trauma. The real Amanda with real insecurities, trauma wounds, possibly sexual trauma wounds, definitely mental health issues, was trying to emerge and had no way to emerge. She had no healthy way to express her pain. So her body rebelled. She fell into depression. She fixated on her changing body through drugs, through different types of body modifications that we're going to see earlier. And we're going to talk about the psychology to that as well. But also she withdrew from the one thing she always knew, which was acting. It was basically her body saying, we can't be that perfect girl anymore and we will not do it. This is the stage where the facade starts crumbling. The sweet Amanda we knew was giving way to someone who was deeply unhappy and unstable. Though we didn't fully see it yet, the adolescent brain cannot sustain a fragmented identity created in childhood. So basically, when you hit your mid-20s, the false self that you have built to cope will either solidify into lifelong dysfunction or it will begin to break apart, demanding truth. And for Amanda, it broke apart dramatically. And this is really the turning point. This is where we start to see Amanda unraveling. So let's go over some of what we saw at that point. So this was around 2012, 2013. Remember that article that basically said she was Marsha Brady came out in 2002. So a decade later of holding it together, being Marsha Brady, this is really where we see her begin to crumble in the public eye. This is the era most people think of as her meltdowns, but let's reframe this a little bit, because what was it really? Cry for help from her traumatized mind and body. And remember, when trauma has no language, it will speak through behavior. And basically, Amanda's behaviors became louder and louder. So I'm gonna list some key incidents that were also key warning signs if we would have listened, but we never listen until it's gone too far. And then we sit here and say, how did they become this way? But we're gonna go through it. You might remember the Twitter era where she had many incoherent, buck-ass wild tweets. They swung from being kind of funny to deeply disturbing. And one saying that she wanted the rapper Drake to murder her. I don't think I can say that word. She also tweeted various insults at celebrities, calling people ugly, random attacks on Rihanna and even the Obamas. She said Barack Obama and Michelle Obama are ugly. She once posted, not the best girl. She had said to Rihanna, Chris Brown beat you because you're not pretty enough. Not the best thing to say. But I mean, obviously something was very wrong with Amanda. Like this sweet, empathetic girl. And I'll say, even like after she's gone on these interviews, it's like, I see the empathy in her. I, in no part of this, think that she is this like terrible, mean person meant any of this. I think you're seeing someone who it's like, I'm hurt. I'm a great example of hurt people hurt people. And the paparazzi at this time was just brutal. I mean, this is in the era of Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan getting DUIs, like everyone, zero empathy, zero bits of us being trauma informed, like really just like ending up in such a toxic feedback loop probably for her, where she's literally like screaming for help, crying out for help, probably in the worst moments of her life, having to face probably for the first time all of this horrific trauma, and people are just laughing at her. They're calling her ugly. They're like paparazzi's capitalizing on this train wreck that we're seeing before our eyes. No one's really asking her if she's okay. And if they are, they're asking in a super condescending way, are you okay, Amanda? Like, obviously she's not okay. Like, get this poor girl some help. But instead it's like memes and jokes. And yeah, I mean, we treated Amanda horribly. Everyone owes her a big fucking I'm sorry. And this is what's so frustrating because eventually it ends up we're like, no one's laughing, like took it too far. And that's what happened. So by the mid 2013, Amanda Bynes goes from being troubled to truly unhinged. This is where she ends up in a 5150. She locked herself in a New York City cupcake store bathroom. She was arrested for throwing a bong out her apartment window. And then it got really bad when she wandered into a neighbor's driveway in Thousand Oaks and set a fire with a small gas canister. She lit that on fire on the pavement.
It's shocking how it's become popular to go to rehab.
Amanda Bynes allegedly set fire to this driveway in Thousand Oaks and now is being held on a 5150.
And if that isn't alarming enough, she also doused her small Pomeranian dog in gasoline during the incident. And I mean, really, she could have killed herself. She could have killed her dog. Like this, it's so far beyond like celebrities go wild. This truly was a life or death psychiatric crisis. So this is where she gets put in the 5150, which is an involuntary psychiatric hold. And then this is where the conservatorship comes up. Obviously, conservatorships have become very famous because of Britney Spears, and we are seeing Amanda Bynes in one. I'm really curious, what are your guys' thoughts on this? I think overall I'm anti-conservatorship because we saw how horrible it was with Britney. There is way too much power and control obsession that can get brought into this and really take advantage of these people. Amanda's hard because I'm like, I do think at this point, like she was a danger to herself. She couldn't keep herself safe. But at the same time, it's like, I believe so much in people having personal autonomy over their bodies. And especially when we talk about trauma and healing, like people really cannot heal inside of a conservatorship because they're not allowed to make their own choices. So when the conservatorship ends, and by the way, I think this is exactly what we are seeing with Britney, it's almost like that trauma healing gets put on pause. And I'll give you guys an example. So when I was in undergrad, I worked a lot with domestic violence victims. And I seriously had like the best mentors, the best training. But when I was first getting trained, I was really confused by this concept. And basically, we were taught that if an abuse survivor was going back to their abuser, you support them in making that decision. And that felt so backwards for me because I'm like, what do you mean? Some of these people might end up killed if they go back to their abuser. However, the reason why we did this is because it is one of the only times these people have a voice of someone who says, trust yourself and trust yourself to make a decision. So basically, you're playing the long game psychologically with them. And what you're hoping to do is build that trust inside of them for them to listen to their own voice. Because if they're in an abusive relationship, what is happening with them is they are learning continuously not to trust themselves. They are not able to have the autonomy to make their own decisions. So as hard and as painful as it is, what we're teaching them is self-empowerment for the hopes that they will circle back around and that same self-empowerment muscle that is not developed because they're inside of an abusive relationship will become developed so that they can eventually leave their abusive situation. And this makes sense to me so much when we think about conservatorship because what is happening in it? Yeah, sure, maybe you're being taught that even so Amanda was 27 years old at this time. So as a 27-year-old, you're basically said, like, you cannot make decisions for your life. We do not trust you. And it's hard because at this point, she wasn't making good choices with her life. She was abusing drugs. She's in these psychotic episodes. She could have really hurt herself. She could have hurt someone else. However, like, healing isn't really going to happen in this because you're basically saying you can't do that. Like, we didn't trust you before and now we really don't trust you. And so we're going to keep going through the timeline, but just like keep this in mind when you look at like Britney now and then Amanda when she does get out of the conservatorship. It's like, yeah, you put maybe like a pause on this healing, but none of the healing happened inside of this like 9-year conservatorship. Like, no shit. So when Amanda does enter into this conservatorship, she gets diagnosed with bipolar disorder and mania. And I do want to talk about this for a second because yeah, her erratic actions absolutely can be bipolar, psychosis. Psychosis can develop in this, especially when drugs and alcohol are mixed into this. But again, I think it's way too simplified to just be like, oh, Amanda has bipolar and that's it. No, there's some weird shit going on. And we're going to get in the tweets with her parents. And I don't fully know what is going on with her parents. She had a different upbringing than, you know, some who it's like Britney, where her parents need this money and are obsessed with it. You know, her father was a dentist. They grew up in Thousand Oaks. From what I've read, their relationship is better now. But I mean, personally, in my opinion, which I'm allowed to have, I don't trust the parents. I really don't trust anyone that could like leave their child in this Nickelodeon machine and be like, oh yeah, you and this creepy old man, Dan Schneider, go ahead, go have one-on-ones. I think there is something off here. But let's talk about these tweets that came out. So in 2014, this is when Amanda basically tweets out and accuses her father, Rick Bynes, of having sexually and physically abused her as a child. She gave really graphic details in it. And the media, the internet goes wild over this. But then almost immediately, Amanda retracts this statement in another tweet that shocked the internet that really read almost like pure psychosis and said, my dad never did any of those things. The microchip in my brain made me say those things, but he's the one that ordered them to microchip me. So after this tweet, Amanda gets put on another 5150 involuntary psychiatric hold. Her parents are heartbroken. They denounce this statement. They say it absolutely never happened. She's sick. She's mentally ill. And I feel for her so much because I think Amanda, people who are mentally ill already, like there's already stigma, especially when you bring in like psychosis and bipolar. I just think about like Amanda, her voice already not being heard and her already being so quiet. And yes, saying that you were microchipped is a little out there. But we're going to get into why this makes sense and my theory on why she said this. Basically, this just how this ended up breaks my heart so bad because she already struggles with speaking and telling her trauma and truth. And now she pretty much like laid out where people aren't going to believe her, like where she came out with something and then was like, just kidding, I was microchipped. And then she's on an involuntary 5150 psychiatric hold and people are basically write her off and say, see, she's crazy. And so it really paints a story that like no matter how she talks about her trauma, that she's not going to be believed. Okay, but I want to talk about psychosis for a moment because a lot of people, there's not a lot of information on this. And I think that this is fascinating. So we look at something like microchipped in the brain, your father abused you, and let's just say for this case, like, no, he didn't, for this example. I don't know if he did or not. But people write off psychosis as like, you are literally just having a complete break from reality. But how psychosis forms in the brain is a lot of times it's like the brain is trying to say something, and then this different delusion, layout, story happens because of it. So basically what you can do from someone's psychosis, or what I'm going to do here, is you want to look at what are the themes in this? What is the theme of saying, my father sexually abused me? No, he didn't. It was the microchip. What I hear in this, and what I think is a very plausible theory of what did happen, is maybe her father wasn't the one who sexually abused her, but maybe he didn't protect her from being sexually abused. And in that way, it feels like she was abused. Maybe the brain cannot make sense of what happened yet. She was also really close with like Dan Schneider. As messed up as it sounds, it might not make logical sense to you. When you're trauma informed, it makes perfect sense. But we really become really tied to our abusers, and people really want to protect them. This is not uncommon. Think about all the people who are in domestic violence situations who go back to their abusers, who literally get restraining orders and are seeing their abusers secretly on the side. Think of Stockholm Syndrome victims. Think of people who end up loving their parents after being sexually abused by them, emotionally abused. Like people, we don't want to hate our abusers. It's really sick how the mind attaches to it. But so the psychosis is saying something. And I think even like they microchip me. What is the theme of this? They are controlling me. Hey, guess what? That's actually not that far from reality. So instead of us writing off Amanda Bynes as she's crazy, Looney Tunes, like actually, hello, what she is saying, in my opinion, in my theory, like makes perfect sense. That she was open up to extreme pain and hurt, and her parents did not protect her from it. I think that there is a theory that maybe her parents did abuse her in some way. But even to just watch, to be the bystander in your child being abused and neglecting to protect them, that is also a form of being abused by your parents. And then add on to, yeah, they microchip me. She was controlled her whole life. And even in this conservatorship, she is still being controlled. Yeah, of course, maybe she thinks she's been microchipped, okay? But how far is her whole life being controlled? How far away is that from a microchip? It's not, might as well have put a microchip in her. because you know what? It's a pretty similar life. So after the microchip incident, Amanda kind of goes away. She apparently is getting some help. We start to see rumors and hopes that she's doing better. In 2018, she gets an associate's degree. She's going to work towards a bachelor's degree. I also remember this time her working with a life coach, which I want to take the time to say, Amanda Bynes, if you ever see this, it would be the honor of my lifetime to work together. This also goes for anyone watching. I think that what I do and the work I do with my clients is so unique, impactful. I can't tell you how many clients I've sat with that have told me that they have done 12 years of therapy, and in one session with me, things have changed in a way that they didn't have changed in 12 years, that they have heard things that have made a shift. I know my work is powerful. I know it's impactful. And the thing that I see about these celebrities too, like we saw this with Britney Spears, is like they're in a vulnerable place and they need help. And then somehow like the most slimy people end up in their lives. And it always irritates me so much, as I'm like, you need to be surrounded by good people. So like I said, if you ever want to reach out, I think I can help. I would be honored to help. There's a lot of psychological layers to this. It's very complex, and it's something that I really understand. I have been blessed enough to work with clients from all over the world. I've worked with other celebrity clients, and also that's available for you guys watching. If you're ever watching this and you want to book a session with me, you can do so. I always leave the link to do that down in the description of each video. I have been able to work with the most amazing clients from these YouTube videos, but this is something I've been doing for the last 10 years. Eat, sleep, breathe, all of this stuff. But even if you guys never book a session with me, I hope that you are able to see yourself in these videos. That is the point of it. Yes, we are talking about Amanda Bynes today, but the point is for you to see yourself in this, for you to learn, for you to grow, for you to finally feel seen, feel validated in your pain, and hopefully take these lessons so that you can learn more about yourself, learn more about others, have a more compassionate view on this world, and move forward in that way. So back to Amanda, like I said, in 2018, it seems like she's coming around. It almost seems like she's going to give us this Lindsay Lohan redemption arc. This is the time where she did her interview with Paper Magazine. She came out on the scene. She looked great. She spoke great in her interview, spoke very honestly, said that she had so much shame, which makes me sad. Shame is such a detrimental emotion. I don't think it's a very helpful emotion, but she talked, and I'm sure she is filled with enough of it, but she talked about just being really ashamed and embarrassed for the tweets, for the things that she said. Again, like we've talked about some people on this show, Jay-Z, and we have seen it's like some people are monsters. Amanda is someone who has been traumatized. She is not a monster. Like she speaks with so much empathy. She speaks with remorse. She doesn't speak as this just like rageful monster. And she spoke very honestly about using drugs and how that made her a completely different person. Like I said, I think that there is a reason though that she was using drugs, and that it isn't just as easy as having bipolar and being on drugs, which of course that contributes to a changed behavior, but it's like what came before all of that. And that's a question we miss. And because we miss asking that question, these people don't get help. But okay, so we're in 2018, 2019, and it seems like she is doing really well. And lawyers and doctors agree that she was even stable enough to end her 9-year conservatorship that she was in. But life isn't as neat as ending a conservatorship. It's not the end of a movie where we all just hooray and high five and all of the trauma is gone. And this is what I think people thought was going to happen with Britney Spears. But guess what? After the conservatorship is over, all of that trauma is still there. And this is a really great lesson for us that trauma and healing is not linear. So in March 2023, Amanda is blasted across all of the headlines. Again, in a very chilling scenario, far beyond celebrities go wild. She is in the streets of downtown Los Angeles, completely naked and alone. And in this, apparently, Amanda waves down a car, says that she's in the middle of a psychotic episode and that she needs help. And I just think about like the resilience of Amanda. Sorry, did not think I was going to get emotional in that, but that it's like, keep in mind, like she is in the middle of a full-blown break from reality, and there is still a part of her that is saying like, I need help and I need to save myself. Like despite everything that she has been through, like there is a piece in her that is still screaming out for help. And like that says resilience. Like that says a part of you, like despite everything, is still fighting. I think I get emotional with that piece. I think resilience is such a beautiful, and it's a phenomenon. Like psychologists cannot even understand resilience, but they can study this. They can study learned helplessness in rats, in cockroaches, and alongside learned helplessness, where some animals, people just give up, they also find in that resilience. And they can't really like pinpoint what is that, but I relate to anyone who has that, because it's something where for me, I'm like, damn, sometimes you're like, I can't, like, I don't know what kept me standing. I don't know what kept me like trying to get help after being knocked down over and over again. Like I can't name what that feeling is. But when I see it in someone, I'm like, what a beautiful testament and statement to also what trauma is, that in the midst of the hardest shit that we go through and the most pain that we experience in the world, that like somewhere inside of us is still this piece that says like, maybe this time I'll get help. And so I just want to say to Amanda, like, despite even in your darkest times, like I see that in you. There is like that piece that's like, please help me. So in this again, Amanda gets put on an involuntary psychiatric hold. And it's really interesting, the timing that this happened at is that she was supposed to schedule like a few days later to be at this 90s con fan event, like with other old Nickelodeon co-stars, which I mean, also kind of makes sense of the body keeping score and this trauma like being there. And I'm sure like what this maybe represented. To me, it makes sense that she's kind of having this relapse. And another thing that I really want to talk about, I think this is a huge part of Amanda's psyche, but let's just call it what it is and talk about how different she looks than how she used to. And I think it's really important that we understand this, because there is so much cruelty that has happened because of her looking different. But I would bet to say that this is the whole point, that Amanda's psyche does not want to look how she used to. What we're really seeing is self-protection through desexualization and debeautification. This is actually not uncommon for us to see with people who have gone through a sexual assault, especially, or through childhood trauma. And especially with women, we can be wired and learn that beauty equals attention, and that attention means that you are not safe. So these bodily changes and appearance changes that we are seeing in Amanda, they are not random, they are adaptive. Like I said, a lot of times people with sexual trauma or who have had boundary violations, they're not letting themselves go, they're letting themselves hide. Again, the body does what the survivor cannot articulate. It dampens the very traits that drew unsafe attention. And think about even with weight gain. What are you literally doing? You are putting weight and fat, basically you are putting a shield, a physical shield against you and someone else. And literally, we see this happening with survivors of sexual assault all the time. Like, again, trauma is a health epidemic. And I really think about this when it comes to people who are overweight. How many times do we look at people who are overweight and we judge and we say, oh, they're lazy, they're not doing all this? I would bet you so much money that if there was better studies, allow me to lead it, how many obese people you would find that have deep childhood trauma, that literally his body is acting as a defense and shield against, do not come close to me. I do not want to be an object of your desire. The body is literally protecting itself by becoming undesirable. And this can show up in a lot of ways. Weight gain is one of them. Shaving your head is another one. Who have we seen that in? Maybe the sex symbol pop star whose hair was literally a symbol of such. We can also see this in people who wear oversized clothing, who do body modification. The alternate aesthetics is a subconscious shield. And we're usually so mean to these people, but it's not self-neglect, it's self-defense. And look out for a child star like Amanda. Her beauty was not freedom. It was the currency that the industry industry used to control her. I really think that her body changing is her psyche saying, if I'm not beautiful, you cannot use me anymore. If I'm not desirable, you cannot harm me again. What it looks like her ruining her appearance is probably her reclaiming her body after a lifetime of not being able to. I really think it's the identity fragmentation, rejecting the old parts of herself. So that's why I say when people are like, Amanda doesn't look like herself anymore. Yeah, that's probably the fucking point of it. So when I see Amanda, I don't see someone who became less beautiful. I see someone whose body refused to keep performing that same role again and again. When a child experiences trauma, the nervous system as an adult is going to try to reshape, to repair, and feel safe. And I really think Amanda's appearance is the message that her words cannot say. So where does that take us to where we're at now? Well, Amanda's story is very human, and like so many others, because it is not this tidy, wrapped up in a bow, happy ending. There isn't a happy ending. There is just lessons here. It's not a fairy tale, it's real life. And in real life, healing is messy, it's non-linear, and it's often incomplete. But her journey has forced a long overdue conversation about child stars and mental health. The uncomfortable truth is that Amanda Bynes was doomed to this path in many ways, not by fate or genetics, but by us, by the industry who exploited her youth, by executives who profited over protection, and by the tabloids and late night hosts who mocked her when she cracked, and by an audience, yes, including us, that treated her breakdown as entertainment. Like I said, Amanda Bynes is not a mystery, and the tragedy is multi-layered. Amanda's literal psychological break was in part an act of psychological self-defense, a grotesque way of killing off the good girl Amanda that she could not live in anymore. And for all of our progress in mental health, society still has a morbid fascination with watching stars fall from grace. It's literally like we keep playing the collective role of the Romans in the Colosseum, watching people die for entertainment, and then later on going, oh, how tragic. And unless things change, we will do it with the next young, talented kid who emerges on the scene. And not every child star is abused on set or controlled by a toxic parent, but almost all of them emerge with scars. These outcomes aren't mysterious. The psychology of child fame is practically a horror genre. So what do we take from Amanda Bynes' saga besides sadness? Perhaps righteous anger on her behalf or a demand for change? Because the dark psychology of Amanda Bynes isn't really hers alone. It's ours. It's the dark collective psychology of an industry and an audience that created the perfect storm for a mental health catastrophe. The entertainment machine built her up, hollowed her out, and let her pick up the pieces. And to Amanda's immense credit, she is picking up those pieces. She's alive, she's trying every day to find a sense of self beyond the childhood star. Amanda 100% deserved so much better. Her story really is a tragedy. That is the end of what I have for you guys today. Please tell me in the comments your thoughts. Tell me who you would like me to break down next, and I will see you guys in the next one.